He had never believed in blind dates before, but something about this one felt different. Maybe it was the quiet message he had received the night before, or the strange excitement in his chest that he couldn't explain. He walked down the narrow street, the sun fading behind tall buildings, casting long shadows across the pavement. Every step felt heavier than the last, not because of his shoes, but because of the strange feeling in the air, like something unusual was about to happen. The cafe was small, tucked between two tall brick buildings, almost hidden. Warm light spilled out from its windows, and a soft hum of music floated through the open door. He paused for a moment outside, checking his reflection in the glass. Everything looked normal, but a tiny whisper in his mind told him that nothing about today would be normal. He shook his head and stepped inside. Inside, the air was warm and smelled of coffee and pastries. Most tables were empty, but a few people sat quietly, reading or talking in hushed tones. He chose a table near the window and sat down, trying to calm his nerves. He glanced at his watch. She should be here any minute. The moments stretched. Minutes felt like hours. Then, the door opened again, and a chill ran down his spine. It was her. Or at least it should have been. But the figure that stepped inside did not look human. She was tall and graceful, her movements smooth and deliberate. Her skin glimmered faintly under the cafe lights, like scales catching the last sunlight of the evening. Her eyes were large and deep, reflecting a sadness so intense it almost hurt to look at. He blinked, unsure if his mind was playing tricks on him. But she was real, sitting at a table across the room, alone. The cafe seemed to shrink around her presence. People glanced at her but quickly looked away, as if sensing a story too heavy to witness. The music felt softer, slower, almost respectful of the silence she carried with her. He realized she was not just beautiful. She carried grief in her every gesture. A single tear slid down her cheek, and she brushed it away quickly, as if embarrassed by her own emotion. His heart tightened. Who was she? And why did he feel an invisible pull toward her? He tried to speak, but his voice refused to cooperate. He wanted to ask her if she was okay, to offer some comfort, but the words never came. Instead, he watched as she glanced around the room, her gaze sharp and searching. She was looking for someone, or something, but it wasn't him, and yet he could not stop staring. Her presence was magnetic, dangerous, and strangely comforting all at once. Suddenly, the cafe door opened again, letting in a gust of cold wind. He shivered and noticed her flinch slightly, a subtle movement that made him realize she was sensitive to everything around her. It wasn't just the cold. It was the world itself reacting to her grief. He had never seen anything like it. A candle on a nearby table flickered. Shadows danced oddly across the walls, and yet she remained calm, almost regal, despite the disturbance she seemed to cause without even trying. As he gathered his courage to approach her, a barista brought her a cup of something steaming. She held it carefully, her long fingers curling around the cup as if it were fragile. Her eyes met his briefly, and he felt a shock run through him, like lightning. She knew he was there, even though he had not spoken. That look, full of sorrow, wisdom, and something unreadable, made his stomach twist. He wondered how someone could carry such heavy emotion while still appearing so strong. The minutes crawled forward. He found himself moving toward her, unsure why, driven by curiosity and something deeper. Compassion, perhaps, or fear of missing something extraordinary. He stopped just behind her chair, hesitant. "Hi, I'm supposed to meet someone here," he said, his voice trembling slightly. She turned her head, her eyes softening, and for a moment, he thought he saw a spark of relief, or maybe recognition. "Sit," she said, her voice low but commanding. It wasn't just a request. It was an invitation into her world, a world filled with sorrow and secrets. He sat down, heart pounding, and the air between them seemed charged with energy he couldn't understand. The normal rules of conversation didn't seem to apply here. Every word felt important, every glance heavy with meaning. As they exchanged the first few sentences, the cafe noises seemed to fade away. It was as if the entire universe had narrowed to just the two of them. And in that moment, he knew this was no ordinary blind date. Something incredible and possibly dangerous was beginning. Something that would change his life forever. And just like that, he realized. He had stepped into a story he did not yet understand. A story where grief, mystery, and something far beyond human would collide. The moment felt heavy, like the air itself had thickened around them. He kept staring at her, trying to understand the strange aura she carried. Her eyes, deep and glimmering, seemed to hold centuries of sorrow and stories he could not even imagine. She didn't speak much at first, just lifted the cup to her lips and sipped carefully, as if each movement were deliberate, calculated. He wondered if she even noticed him, or if he was just a part of the scenery in her world. I'm glad we met, he finally said, breaking the silence. His words sounded clumsy even to him. She tilted her head slightly, her ears, or what looked like delicate extensions from her head, moving subtly. You came, she replied softly. There was no warmth in her voice, only a quiet acknowledgement that he existed. Yet something about the way she said it made him feel that he mattered. He tried to make small talk, asking about her day, her work, the usual questions one would ask on a date. But every answer she gave seemed layered with meaning. She spoke carefully, as if revealing too much would break something fragile. He noticed her fingers traced invisible patterns on the table, like she was following some ritual only she understood. A shiver ran down his spine. Something about her movements was both elegant and slightly unnerving. Then, almost accidentally, she glanced at his hand resting near the table. Her eyes widened, just for a second, and he felt a strange pressure in the air, like the cafe itself had paused. The candle flames flickered violently, and a shadow moved along the wall as if it had a mind of its own. He blinked, convinced he had imagined it. But she had seen it too. Her lips pressed together, and for the first time, he saw her grief mix with fear. You feel it too, she whispered, more to herself than to him. The presence. It's close. He frowned. The presence. She nodded slightly, her eyes scanning the room again. My mate's absence left something behind. Something that follows me. Her voice trembled just enough for him to notice, though she tried to control it. He realized that grief could be dangerous, even beyond human understanding. The barista dropped a tray nearby, and the clatter made him jump. But she remained perfectly still, calm, except for her eyes, which darted toward the door repeatedly. The cafe's other patrons seemed oblivious to the tension, but he could feel it like a weight pressing down on his chest. Something was out there, and it was aware of her, aware of them. Trying to distract himself, he smiled awkwardly and asked, Do you come here often? She gave a small, almost sad smile. Not really, she said. I travel a lot, but sometimes, even a traveler needs a moment of quiet, even if it's fleeting. He nodded, pretending to understand, though he had no idea what kind of life she lived. Her words carried a strange weight, the kind that made you realize that ordinary life, problems, and worries were trivial compared to hers. The conversation flowed slowly after that, but the air around them remained thick with tension. He noticed her glancing out the window repeatedly, and every time she did, the shadows seemed to shift in unusual ways. A soft hum filled the room, like a vibration from the walls themselves, though no one else seemed to notice. His curiosity grew. Who, or what, was she truly? Then, unexpectedly, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small object wrapped carefully in cloth. He leaned forward, trying to see, but she quickly tucked it away again. It's private, she said simply, with a hint of warning. He wanted to ask more, but the fear of upsetting her stopped him. He realized that some secrets were not meant to be asked about, at least not yet. Minutes passed, and the cafe felt smaller, almost like it had transformed into a space where only they existed. Every sound outside, every shadow, every flicker of light seemed to revolve around her presence. He felt a strange mix of awe and anxiety. She was unlike anyone he had ever met. Not human, not ordinary. She carried a story he couldn't yet comprehend, but he was already drawn into it. Finally, she looked directly at him, her eyes intense but filled with sadness. "You didn't come here to meet me, did you?" she asked softly. He shook his head. "I thought it was just a blind date." She laughed quietly, a sound that was soft and haunting. "Fate has a strange way of bringing people together. Maybe you were meant to be here." Her words lingered in the air, heavy with meaning. He wanted to respond, to ask questions, but the weight of her grief and the tension around them left him speechless. He realized he was in the middle of something extraordinary, something that could change his understanding of the world forever. She was a living mystery, and he had unknowingly stepped into her story. The door opened again, and a gust of wind blew through the cafe. She flinched slightly but did not leave her seat. His heart raced. He realized that whatever presence followed her might be closer than he thought. And for the first time he understood. This blind date was not just a meeting. It was the start of something dangerous, something magical, and something he couldn't walk away from. He glanced at her, and she met his gaze steadily. "Be careful," she said softly. "Some things are not meant to be witnessed by ordinary people." His curiosity surged even more. He leaned back in his chair, unsure whether he was ready, but knowing deep inside that he had already crossed a line, one that could never be uncrossed. The cafe seemed quieter now, though people still moved around, oblivious to the tension that filled the air. He could barely focus on anything but her. There was something about her grief that pulled at him, a heaviness that made it impossible to look away. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft but commanding. "I didn't just lose a mate," she said, her eyes darkening. "I was betrayed by someone I trusted." He swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. Betrayal? By who? And what did it have to do with him? He felt the hairs on his arms rise. The air around her seemed to thrum with energy, subtle but undeniable. He could see it now. Her sadness was not ordinary. It had a weight, a presence almost alive. "My mate," she continued, "was more than a companion. They were part of me, and when they were taken, something followed me back to this world. I cannot escape it." Her hands trembled slightly, though she tried to hide it. He noticed the faint shimmer along her arms, scales glinting under the light, a beauty that was almost painful to behold. He wanted to ask questions, but he knew some stories were dangerous to interrupt. Instead, he listened as she revealed glimpses of her life, traveling across stars, speaking to creatures and people he could not even imagine, carrying responsibilities that seemed far too great for anyone to bear. And yet, she bore them all, with grace and sorrow intertwined. As she spoke, the cafe began to feel strange. Shadows stretched longer than they should, and the candle flames flickered, though no wind passed through. A soft vibration hummed under the floorboards, almost like a heartbeat. He realized that the world around her responded to her grief and her presence. It was subtle but undeniable. "I try to hide it," she admitted quietly, her eyes flicking toward the door. "But sometimes the energy leaks out. People notice things they shouldn't, feel things they shouldn't, and some follow it." He didn't understand at first, but a cold fear settled in his chest. Follow it? Was she being hunted? Or was it something else entirely? He remembered the shadows moving earlier, the flicker of something impossible in the corner of his vision. She noticed him noticing. "You feel it too," she said, almost a whisper. "You sense it, the danger, the emptiness left behind. Most cannot. Most would run if they knew." He nodded slowly, words failing him. He didn't want to run. He wanted to understand, to know why fate had put him here, in the presence of someone so powerful and sorrowful. For the first time, she smiled. Not fully, not happily, but a soft, sad curve of her lips. "I am not used to company," she said, "especially not company that does not fear me outright." His heart pounded. Fear? Him? He had never felt fear like this before. Not for a person, not for anything. But it wasn't ordinary fear. It was a mix of awe, curiosity, and a strange thrill, like standing too close to a storm. Then, without warning, she reached into her bag again, pulling out a small crystal-like object. It glowed faintly in her hand, pulsing softly like a heartbeat. He gasped, unable to look away. "This belonged to my mate," she whispered. "It holds memories, feelings, fragments of them. I cannot let it go." She pressed it close to her chest, and for a moment, the energy in the room surged, warm but tinged with danger. He felt it too. A shiver ran down his spine, and he realized the cafe was no longer just a cafe. It was a place transformed by her presence, her grief, and her power. The ordinary world he knew had been replaced, for these moments, by something extraordinary. He was standing at the edge of a story he didn't yet understand, caught between wonder and fear. She looked at him again, her eyes searching, almost pleading. "You should not be here," she said softly. "This world, this moment, it is not safe for those who cannot see beyond what is ordinary. But perhaps you were meant to witness this." He nodded slowly, unsure if he was ready, yet feeling that he had no choice. He was already in the middle of her story. The hum under the floorboards grew slightly louder. Shadows danced more vividly along the walls. He realized that her grief, her power, and the invisible presence that followed her had begun to intertwine with him. He could feel it touching him in ways he did not yet understand. And yet he did not move. He could not. Curiosity had chained him in place, and awe had frozen him in wonder. Minutes passed, but in the strange world she had created around them, time felt meaningless. Finally, she spoke again, her voice steady but soft, like the quiet before a storm. "My mate's absence is dangerous," she said. "And now you are here. That means you are part of this too. You will see things you cannot unsee. You will feel things you cannot ignore." He swallowed hard, understanding that this blind date had become a crossing point between ordinary life and something far beyond. And in that moment, he realized that he had entered a story he could not walk away from. She was a mystery, a danger, and a grief that held power. And he was already entangled in it, heart and mind, with no turning back. The quiet hum of the cafe no longer felt ordinary. He could sense it, a low vibration under the floorboards, almost like a warning. The alien dragon lady's eyes were sharper now, scanning every corner of the room, every shadow. He had never seen anyone so alert, so aware, as if she could feel the presence of danger before it even appeared. And now he realized she could. "I can feel it," she whispered, her voice almost lost in the hum of the cafe. "It is coming closer. My mate's absence has left a void. Something is trying to fill it." Her fingers trembled slightly, though she tried to hide it. The glow from the small crystal she carried pulsed faintly, as if responding to her emotions. He had the strange sense that the air itself was charged with energy, thick and heavy, pressing down on them both. Suddenly, a shadow moved outside the cafe window. He leaned forward, trying to see, but the figure was gone before he could focus. She noticed it instantly. "There," she said softly, pointing. Her eyes burned with a mix of fear and determination. "Do you see it? It is aware of me, of us. You must stay close." He nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. He had never felt danger so intensely, so close, yet invisible. The other patrons seemed completely unaware of the tension. Cups clinked. A chair scraped against the floor, but he barely noticed. All his attention was on her, on the way she moved, and on the subtle shifts in the shadows around them. She was calm, almost regal, but he could see the underlying panic she fought to suppress. He realized she was not only grieving. She was hunting, fleeing, and protecting all at once. "I lost someone important," she murmured, almost to herself. "And now, I cannot lose anyone else who matters." She glanced at him, her gaze piercing. He felt it like a physical force. "You cannot leave," she said softly but firmly. "This threat, it will not spare you if you are alone." He shivered, realizing that the danger was not just a story or a warning. It was real. Something was out there, and it had noticed her presence. The hum grew louder, almost like a heartbeat, vibrating through the floor and into his bones. Shadows stretched along the walls, twisting and flickering in impossible ways. He noticed reflections in the glass, shapes that shouldn't exist, moving too quickly to be human. The cafe felt smaller, suffocating, yet strangely alive. Every sound, every flicker of light, seemed to revolve around her. She stood suddenly, her movements smooth and controlled, though there was urgency in her every gesture. "We must leave," she said quietly. He wanted to ask where, why, but the fear in her eyes silenced him. They moved toward the door together, and as they stepped outside, the wind blew harder, carrying a chill that made the hairs on his arms stand. The streets seemed darker now, shadows stretching unnaturally along the pavement. He realized that the world outside the cafe had changed. It was not the city he knew anymore. It felt like stepping into another layer of reality, one where the rules were different. He could feel the presence growing, moving closer, and he instinctively stayed near her, drawn not only by curiosity but by the sense that she could protect him, or perhaps lead him into something far more dangerous. She paused under a dim streetlight, her eyes scanning the darkness. "It senses fear," she whispered. "Fear makes it stronger. You must not be afraid." He tried to steady his breathing, to convince himself that he could handle whatever was coming. But deep down, he knew fear was already wrapping around him, like cold hands gripping his chest. Then he saw it, just a flicker at first, a shadow detaching from the wall, moving with impossible speed. He froze, but she did not. Her hands glowed faintly as energy seemed to rise from her body, surrounding her in a protective shimmer. The shadow stopped for a moment, as if sensing her power, then retreated slightly. He had no idea what it was, but instinctively, he knew it was dangerous. "We cannot stay," she said, her voice now urgent. "It will follow if we linger, and it will not be patient." She began to move quickly through the alleyways, her strides long and fluid, and he had to run to keep up. The streets twisted around them, dark corners hiding impossible shapes, but she never faltered. Her grief, her sorrow, and her power all combined into something awe-inspiring and terrifying. As they rounded another corner, she glanced at him. "Do you understand?" she asked. "This world is not what it seems. Danger follows those connected to me, and now, you are connected." He nodded, fear and fascination mixing in his chest. He realized that this blind date had become more than a meeting. It had become a journey into a world he did not yet comprehend, one filled with sorrow, power, and danger beyond imagination. And in that moment, he knew that nothing could prepare him for what came next. The shadows would not relent. The presence would not rest. And he, willingly or not, was now part of her story. They ran through narrow alleys, the shadows stretching and twisting around them. Every step felt heavier than the last, and the chill in the air seemed to seep into his bones. He had never experienced anything like this. He had thought blind dates were awkward, funny, maybe boring, but never dangerous. Never like this. Now, with her leading the way, he felt like he had stepped into a story he could never leave. Finally, they paused in a small, hidden courtyard, away from the flickering streetlights. She turned to face him, her glowing eyes reflecting a sorrow so deep it made him shiver. "You need to understand," she said softly. "My mate. They were taken from me not by accident, by someone I trusted completely." Her hands shook slightly as she pulled the crystal from her bag, holding it close. Its faint glow pulsed with memories, emotions, fragments of her lost companion. He stepped closer, compelled by both fear and curiosity. Who betrayed you?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Her gaze pierced him, as if searching his soul. "Someone I called a friend. Someone I believed would never harm us. But greed, jealousy, it twisted their heart. They wanted what I held, what we shared, and they took it." Her words hung heavy in the night air, and he realized that her grief was not just sadness. It was anger, loss, and warning all at once. The courtyard seemed to shift around them. Shadows danced along the walls, flickering as if alive. He noticed the faint shimmer of her scales under the dim light, and the glow from the crystal illuminated her face in a ghostly way. "The absence of my mate left a void," she continued. "And that void attracts things, dark things. They follow me, they hunt me, and now—" Her eyes softened slightly and she looked at him. "Now you are here. You feel it too, don't you?" He nodded, unable to speak. The sensation of danger, grief, and power surrounding her pressed on him like a weight. He felt connected to her story in a way that terrified him but also pulled him closer. She was not just a being of sorrow. She was alive with energy, strength, and danger, and he had unknowingly stepped into her world. "I tried to fight it alone," she admitted, her voice trembling for the first time. "I thought I could bear the grief, the danger, the loneliness. But the presence never rests. It never forgets. And now, it has noticed you." His heart skipped a beat. He realized that by being here, by being near her, he had become part of this perilous story. Fear mixed with fascination in a way he could not untangle. Suddenly, the crystal pulsed brighter, a soft hum filling the courtyard. Shadows stretched unnaturally, and the air felt thicker, charged with tension. She raised her hands slightly, and he could see faint lines of energy weaving between her fingers. "It is coming closer," she whispered. "The one who took my mate, and the emptiness that follows, both are near. We have little time." He stepped instinctively closer, feeling the strange energy surround them. "What do we do?" he asked. Her eyes softened for a moment, and she smiled faintly, though it was tinged with sadness. "We survive, we fight, and we uncover the truth. You must trust me, even if you do not understand." The words were simple, but the weight behind them was immense. He realized that his life, his understanding of reality, and perhaps even his fate, had been irrevocably changed. The courtyard grew darker, and he could see faint, shifting shapes at the edges of his vision. Something was moving closer, drawn by her grief and the crystal's glow. It was neither human nor animal, but something that existed between worlds. He shivered, but did not step back. He trusted her, and yet the fear in his chest was almost unbearable. "Stay close," she said, her voice steady now, stronger than before. "Do not let fear control you. You cannot run from what is coming, but together—" She lifted the crystal, and the glow expanded, casting long, strange shadows around them. "Together, we might survive it." He nodded, feeling the gravity of the moment. Ordinary life, normal dates, simple worries, they all seemed distant now, irrelevant in the face of what stood before them. He realized that the bond they were forming, fragile yet undeniable, might be the only thing keeping them safe. And in that instant, he knew that this blind date had become a journey into danger, grief, and revelation, one that would change him forever. The night seemed to hold its breath. The shadows moved, the air vibrated, and the presence drew closer. He felt the tension coil around him, a mixture of fear and awe, as the alien dragon Diplomat prepared to face what had taken her mate, and whatever darkness had followed. He could not look away, could not flee. He was part of her story now, and the final test was about to begin. The courtyard was silent, except for the faint hum that seemed to vibrate from the crystal she held. The shadows were alive now, stretching and twisting as if testing their resolve. He felt the presence pressing closer, a cold weight that seemed to seep into his very bones. Every instinct in his body screamed to run, but he stayed, rooted by curiosity, awe, and a strange sense of duty. She turned to him, her glowing eyes meeting his. "This is it," she whispered. "The moment of choice. I cannot fight alone anymore. You can leave and perhaps you will survive. But then you will never understand what is happening." Her hand brushed his briefly, and he felt a jolt of warmth mixed with energy, as if the world itself had shifted. "No," he said, voice shaking but firm. "I'm not leaving. I want to help." Her lips curved in a faint, sad smile. "Very well," she said. "Then you must trust me completely. Do not hesitate. Fear will make it stronger." The crystal in her hand pulsed brighter, casting long, strange shadows around them. He felt the energy rising, almost alive, reacting to their determination. Suddenly, the darkness moved faster. Shapes emerged, grotesque and shifting, neither human nor animal. The air grew thick, and he could barely see, but she did not falter. She raised the crystal, and a warm, glowing light spread outward, pushing the shadows back. Her voice rose, soft but commanding, chanting words he could not understand. The shadows hissed and writhed but did not advance. He realized that her grief, her sorrow, and her lost love had become a weapon and a shield. The presence feeding on her pain recoiled, unable to touch her fully. Yet he knew it was only temporary. The danger was far from gone. She glanced at him, eyes full of urgency. "You must be ready," she said. "When it strikes again, you will need courage beyond fear. Do you understand?" I understand," he whispered. He had never felt so small, yet so alive. The danger, the grief, the power, it was overwhelming, but he knew running was not an option. They were connected now, bound by something far greater than himself. The shadows surged, faster and darker than before, moving toward them like a tidal wave of malice. She stepped forward, holding the crystal high, the light spilling outward, illuminating the courtyard with a soft, golden glow. He felt the energy wash over him, filling him with strength he didn't know he had. The presence faltered, hissing and twisting, unable to breach her light. Then, in a sudden motion, she turned to him. "This is your moment," she said. "Do not falter. Trust me. Trust yourself." He nodded, adrenaline surging. Together, they stepped into the center of the light, facing the approaching darkness. The shadows recoiled, twisting and turning as if confused by their courage and unity. He could feel the connection between them, between her grief, her power, and his newfound resolve. Time seemed to stretch, each second heavy with danger and tension. The shadows hovered, uncertain, and then slowly, they began to retreat, pulling back into the corners of the courtyard. The light from the crystal flared once more, and the air vibrated with energy, before settling into a calm hum. He realized they had survived, but only barely. The danger had not disappeared, it had only been pushed away for now. She lowered the crystal, exhaustion evident in her posture. "It will return," she said softly, "and next time it may be stronger. But now you have seen, you have felt, and you have chosen." He nodded, heart racing, realizing that nothing would ever be the same. This was no longer a blind date. It was the beginning of something far bigger, far stranger, and far more dangerous. The courtyard fell silent again. The shadows had receded, the wind had calmed, but the air still hummed with unseen energy. She looked at him, eyes softening, and for the first time, he saw a glimmer of hope in her sorrow. "Perhaps together we can face what comes next," she said. He smiled, unsure if he was ready, but knowing he could not walk away. And in that moment, he understood the truth. Some encounters are never ordinary. Some meetings are never casual. Some blind dates lead to worlds beyond imagination, grief beyond understanding, and choices that define your fate. He had entered her story, and it was only the beginning. The night stretched on, filled with possibility and danger, and he knew one thing for certain. He would never forget this date, and he would never forget the alien dragon diplomat who had pulled him into a story of grief, power, and mystery.